Florida State football season, less than 2 weeks away. We're finally on there. There's football this week, and so we had to bring on someone who covers it on a national level, Richard Johnson with Sports Illustrated Split Zone Duo. Richard, how's it going?
It's going good, man. It is very, very nice to finally talk about some football.
The football is palpable, especially after covering the weeks of the realignment stuff around here. The future's great. We'll get to that.
I was going to say, it's a lot of the realignment stuff the last couple of weeks. It's the fault of folks just a few miles away from you. It's
no comment.
That's on them.
No comment. Well, I guess let's start. We might end up there in the end. Let's start on Florida State. Obviously, Mike Norvell coming off the big breakthrough season, kind of Florida State. I mean, this is the newfound expectations definitely for him in Tallahassee. I'm curious, you've been covering on a national level college football for a while now. I guess your impressions of, conversations you've had with Mike Norvell, or just your impressions of the coach he is, the person he is, and the job he's done at Florida State.
Yeah, I think Mike is really sharp. I came down there in March of last year, sat with the whole offensive staff for a day and kind of talked through some things with them. Wrote a story on offensive coordinator Alex Atkins. And that's the first time I really kind of spent a significant amount of time with him. And I've run into him a couple times over the last couple months, ACC meetings in Amelia, he was a lot more chill. He talked about not having the patience to play golf, which was a lot of fun. And really funny. And then at ACC Media Days in Charlotte a few weeks ago. So, I've been around him. I've known his exploits as a coach for a while. I think that his brilliance is less in recruiting and more in development. Obviously, they are recruiting just fine. But I think Mike's real strong suit is developing players. And I think you're seeing that to fruition. I mean, Jordan Travis is probably the greatest example of that, right? It's a guy who the last coaching staff was about to give up on, and he's going to change positions, and then Mike comes in and says, "Hey, I see something in you, and I think you can be the man here." And they've worked with him, and they've been patient with him, and they've let him go. And obviously with all the pieces that they're bringing back this year, you're just seeing players that this coaching staff has been able to identify over the last kind of year and change, 2 years, and bring a group of players together and get them to play to the best of their abilities. I mean, you saw the running backs that he put in the league at Memphis. Like this guy can develop athletes. This guy can develop players and develop a team. And that's where I think their biggest strong suit is.
Yeah, I know you're a guy who watches a lot of film, kind of student of the game type guy. What do you make of Mike's offense? I know that's something he's kind of become revered for as well. He's kind of done more with less, it's felt like. And that's what I mean. If the recruiting is at the level it's at now, it kind of feels like it makes it a bit of a scary proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a great scheme and you inject better players into that, obviously 1 + 1 is 2 there. I love on offense the way they structure the run game. They use counter a ton, and they layer things on top of counter, which is that play you'll see where two offensive linemen will pull from the backside of the formation to the front side of the play. And, we've been running counter for 50 years. I mean, Washington was doing it in the 80s to get to the Super Bowl. Nebraska was doing it in the 80s and the 90s. It's not a new play, but what I think Florida State staff has done on offense the last few years is find ways to layer on top of that play. They'll do QB counter with Jordan Travis, obviously, to go +1 in the run game and kind of get a numbers advantage. They'll run a ton of RPO on top of counter. So the offensive line will block counter, and then Jordan has an option whether to take it, to give it, or to throw it. And so the way that they're able to iterate on offense has been really cool to see.
The transfer portal, we're obviously still working out the kinks of what it's going to be long-term, things like that. I mean, the new window got added last year, but it's felt like through the first however many years of it, it's become more of a thing. I mean, there have been some kind of guys who tried to claim the transfer portal the crown. Lane was an early guy, Mel Tucker at Michigan State, but I feel like Mike Norvell's been the guy with staying power. I mean, being out there this preseason, I can tell you that the hit rate's high again. I guess I don't know your conversations with him, or just your impression of what he's done through the portal.
Yeah, I don't think you want to build, anybody really wants to build the core of their roster, the core of their team through the portal. I mean, look, you've got extreme examples of like Georgia and Clemson that like don't take any transfers, right? Like Dabo took like a couple last year, and it was like, it was insane. But I think, again, it speaks to development, and it speaks to the ability to identify talent that they're able to go into the portal and hit pretty well. I don't think any coach would tell you they want to build through the portal. Like Mel Tucker, I know, he took that big portal class when he first got there, and even then he was saying, I want to build through high school, I don't want to build through the portal. And then you've seen things, after they hit pretty hot there in the beginning, it's kind of trailed off a little bit. But no, Florida State has, they've been portal mavens. I mean, the guys that they have been able to identify and develop has been really interesting, because you look at a lot of places that, these transfers come in and they come in with a lot of hype and then they don't pan out, or I tend to believe that guys transfer for a reason. And especially transferring kind of like laterally, you know what I mean? Like transferring from a high level P5 to a Florida State, to a Florida, to a Miami, like those guys transfer for a reason. And so I'm often pretty skeptical when that happens, but Florida State is absolutely proving us wrong.
Looking at this year's team, I know listening to the Split Zone Duo ACC preview, and I should say it's my favorite college football podcast. I encourage you all to listen to it with the season coming up. I know how high you are on this Florida State team, and you're definitely not alone in that. I mean, it's a preseason top 10 team. What are the biggest reasons for, why you were kind of buying the hype?
Well, they're sticking together, obviously. They're bringing back so many component parts. I think last season was the perfect, take a step forward season for Florida State, right? They won every game they were supposed to win, pretty much. They lost the games that before the season you would say those are probably going to be losses, right? You end the season beating Florida the way you did, and the vibes are just really, really good. And were really good and have been really good all summer. And I think, when you take into account what Norvell's staff has been able to do with development and taking a step forward, it's one of those things where you kind of look and you say, okay, now's the time. And I do think now is the time. I don't know if undefeated playoff is in the future here, but I certainly think an ACC championship is in the future here. I certainly think, they are ready. They are fully equipped to truly compete with Clemson to win this league. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it at this point in time.
Bouncing off of that, I know you were at ACC kickoff. I talked to you there. I don't know if you voted. What are your thoughts on FSU Clemson going into the season? What did you make of that competition?
I have not voted in a preseason media days poll, and it's not even this is not an abstention thing. I literally just always forget.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, I always forget, and then I see the and I see the email come out. I'm like, I probably should have done that. I'm selfishly, I'm hoping Florida State beats LSU, which is no easy task, by the way. Week 1, I'm hoping Florida State beats LSU because I'm crossing fingers that I will be in Clemson that night, the end of September, for that game. I think me and you were talking in the lobby in Charlotte, and I hadn't even realized how long it had been since Florida State had beaten Clemson. It's been a long time. I think that Clemson on defense, no problems, don't have to worry about it. Clemson on offense, I think Garrett Riley's a great offensive coach. I'm interested in what this Cade Klubnik thing is going to be. I think you saw a lot of good from Cade Klubnik, and then you saw a lot of not so good from Cade Klubnik, especially in the bowl game. My biggest bugaboo with Clemson is the skill talent and the skill players. They have not had a hitter at wide receiver here on this roster, in my opinion. And that's the thing you've got to see, where, I think I think a lot of people think more highly of Will Shipley than I do, probably. I think he's a productive player, but it doesn't necessarily bowl me over as a running back. And so those are the things I think, what makes the difference in probably a close game between Florida State and Clemson. That's where I look. And that's why before we see it from Clemson in the first couple of weeks here, Florida State's just a more known quantity.
Well, and I think along with that, I think it's a good point, the unknowns. And truthfully, not to dunk on Duke, because there's a world where that is a slightly competitive game week 1 for Clemson, but Clemson's first 3 games are what? It's Duke, Charleston Southern, Florida Atlantic. Then you're kind of getting thrown in the deep end a little, going from those 3 to Florida State, even at home.
Yeah, but it's one thing I'm not concerned about is Clemson's ability to get up for a big game. I mean,
no. But they won't have been tested at all. Is more my point. That offense and Garrett Riley.
But on the other hand, you will get chances to work out some kinks, especially with the new offense in the early going. You get a chance to try some stuff. Mike Elko will challenge them on defense, most certainly. And so they will get a chance to kind of smooth out the edges and kind of figure out a little bit of what they are going into that Florida State game. Whereas Florida State, you got to be ready to go from, kickoff on Sunday night, because again, that LSU team is ready to go.
That week 0 game last year was a huge, I think, boon for Florida State.
Yeah, and it's neither of those teams will necessarily be in that game what they will be the rest of the season. I think you saw that in that game last year in the Superdome. Sloppy, a lot of bad ball. There's some weak one-iness inherent in that. But you've also got good teams on both sides. They just played kind of a sloppy game. That was fun, but it was, it was a mess. And so I think you probably can expect a higher quality of game this year. But that, to me, that's a toss-up. I cannot wait for that game. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, talking about, you mentioned Jordan Travis earlier. I guess from your perspective, when did he kind of get on your radar as a dude, like on that level? And I guess, do you believe he's kind of a trendy Heisman pick? I feel like, do you think it's like could be that type of season?
Well, Heisman is a lot of the Heisman race, as we know, has nothing to do with the actual quality of the athlete and sort of the prom king mentality that goes into it to win the award. So just because I'm not so sure he's going to win the Heisman does not mean he's not going to be incredible. I think for me, honestly, probably the Florida game last year. And I know that's a little late. I know that Florida State fans had seen it a lot that season. But the way he grabbed that game by the scruff of the neck, and the way he kind of said, fellas, we're not losing tonight. Like I'm doing this. I'm putting the team on the back. That was really incredible, man. And the way he bounced back in that game on a big stage, big rivalry night, that was huge. And I think that was kind of the complete Jordan Travis in a big spot in that game. And they obviously paid it off by winning the game. So I think you saw it kind of all come together on that night.
Looking at the offense as a whole, with all, like you talked about, all they bring back with the pieces they brought in through the portal, like Keon Coleman and the tight end room, kind of revitalizing that. If you're a defensive coordinator, how do you, it feels like a really tough task on a weekly basis. And I think Jaheim Bell earlier this preseason kind of said, like, I don't wish them luck on a weekly basis. Cause like, how do you stop this offense?
I think it will come back to, can you stop the run game? Can you try to make this offense pass first? I am not so sure that's their strong suit. I think they have to be productive, efficient, and explosive in the run game. And I think that's kind of where it all starts from. So if you can hold down that run game, you can limit that run game, I think you have a chance for significant success against Florida State's offense. But again, easier said than done.
Flipping, looking at the other side of the ball, I feel like there are a few more questions maybe about the defense. I think some Florida State fans would tell you, I know they were, I think, first in the ACC in passing yards per game last year, and that's kind of a meaningless stat, really. But I think Florida State fans would tell you that wasn't the best secondary in the ACC. I guess, what do you make of the defense, and is that the side of the ball you're looking at? If they're not contending for the ACC championship, that might be kind of where it happened?
Yeah, because I think if they lose, the way this Florida State team probably loses is you run the ball flat over them. I have some questions interior up front about what this is going to look like. On the back end, probably fine. Probably fine enough. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a problem. Obviously, they can rush the passer. That's not really the problem. But holding up in the run game on defense is probably the biggest question mark, maybe on this entire roster.
No, I think that's fair. I think the without Fabian Lovett discrepancy last year when he was out there playing against LSU versus when he wasn't and kind of wasn't 100% the rest of the season, I think that was noticeable. And obviously the Daryl Jackson waiver doesn't help them there because he's been a dude in practice.
Yeah, and I was sort of like I was sort of like, oh, it'll be fine, kind of thing, right? I didn't think that he wasn't going to get the waiver.
No, yeah, I don't think the Florida State staff did for a while either, because I think, I mean, the frustration from Florida State and the fan base is definitely, I mean, he's a guy we can talk about. He was on campus before that new rule went to effect January 11th. He was already enrolled, so like it's a tough situation to. And I know Tez Walker's going through it too. Some other guys, who's the guy at Arizona State, but it's a NCAA gonna NCAA.
Yeah, that's it's boy, trying to figure out, try to track, try to keep tabs on it's trying to keep tabs on what they do and how they do it is really something.
I got to ask I have your impressions of the rest of the ACC. Do you have maybe who is a surprise team that could maybe sneak into that top two, or at least be better than people I think generally think they're going to be this year?
Yeah, I don't know if you can sleep on Miami, but I just like they have got to be, but like it can't be that again. I mean, it just cannot be that again. Rejigger the offensive line. I think they'll have some more success on offense. I don't think Duke is going to do that again. I don't. The ball bounced some ways last year for Duke, in some nice ways. So I kind of think I'm kind of low on them. I think you look at Louisville and you think, can they kind of be that third or fourth team in the ACC? Pitt, I've slept on Pitt before and I've gotten screwed over. So all right, Pitt, like it's. Say what you want about them. They have an identity. Narduzzi is going to have them at a stable floor of what they are. Carolina, it's just a situation if they are not going to play any defense, and we know what you're signing up for 12 times when you cut on Carolina games, and it's going to be a ton of fun. And I'm sure they'll get somebody that they're not supposed to get, and they may lose to somebody who you'd scratch your head at, because that's kind of the way they built that thing. Drake May's incredible, but the rest of it. And NC State obviously is a stable floor team, but I have some questions about NC State on offense, especially when you lose Beck and Devin Leary and on offense, because I think Beck is a good player, and I think Beck at Kentucky, honestly, has some reasons for optimism as long as I can block him.
No, yeah, I mean, he might be the best quarterback in the SEC. I know you said that. As crazy as it is, speaks to how bad a league that is.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a resurgent defense year in the SEC.
What do you think? So you talked about Miami a little. I've got to, I guess, get your thoughts on the state of the big three as well. Obviously, Florida State, that can change quickly. We've seen how quickly Florida State's risen. Florida fell off a cliff. Miami kind of similarly. I guess, what do you make of the other two? You talked about Miami a little, maybe throw in some Florida as well.
Yeah, I think Miami. Yeah, I think it starts for Miami up front. It starts from a rejiggered offensive line. You've got some new pieces. They think very highly of the tackles, obviously, that they brought in. Tyler Van Dyke, I'm not the hugest Tyler Van Dyke guy. I knew he had some like really legitimate like top 5 NFL draft burn coming into last season, and then it kind of petered out. I think you saw some of his inconsistencies. I think you saw some of his deficiencies. I think Miami's going to be great on the back end on defense. It's a sort of a similar situation to Florida State up front. Let's figure this out. But I do think Miami's offense is going to change, right? They're getting from kind of less of the run heavy kind of stuff to more of, I don't want to say air raid, but they're gonna be more kind of spread out wide open, and how that balance, or at least I think Gidger may want to be Shannon Dawson, offensive coordinator, may want to be. So how do you balance what I think Shannon Dawson may want to do with what I'm sure Mario wants to do? That is going to be fun to kind of watch that play out over the course of the season. Florida, it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be particularly good this year. I think that they still lack at wide receiver pretty heavily. I think they have a great running back room. They've got 2 really, really good backs. And I think you're going to see sort of, I've been calling it Wisconsin South or Wisconsin Light. I think they're going to have to try to run the heck out of the ball and try to win games that way. I think they're good up front on defense, honestly, as well. So I think you sort of do that blueprint where you run the ball, play defense, and try to kind of be, I don't think they're going to be 2012 Florida, but I do think they're going to be, this ain't fun and gun. They're not equipped to do that right now, I don't think. This is a slow build for Florida. I cannot tell enough people that. And I know Florida fans don't want to hear that. It's Florida. I know Florida State fans didn't want to hear that when Mike Norvell showed up. Nobody in the state of those three schools wants to hear, or no fan of those three schools wants to hear slow build. We understand that, but you don't compete with, and ask Mike Norvell, you don't compete with Clemson. You don't compete with Georgia. You don't compete with Alabama. You don't compete with these schools overnight. It's not microwave. You can get to an SEC championship game. You can get to an ACC championship, but that's not the goals these three programs have. Like the goals these programs have are to compete legitimately for national championships. And I think like even a Michigan, who built it on a solid foundation, has beaten Ohio State 2 years in a row, gets in the playoff and gets slapped around two different ways. Like it's not easy to win these postseason. It's not easy to win a championship, a national championship. And so when you get to a conversation about how to win 2 games in January, it's hard, man. It's real hard when you're coming up against a lot of these, or I guess a couple of these stalwarts, a couple of these programs operating truly at the highest level.
Well, and that Florida schedule, both this year and next year, is brutal. It's doing Billy Napier no favors.
No, but it's I think a 12-team playoff renders some of those things when that kind of comes in next year. I think it renders some of those things a little moot. I think one of the coolest things about a 12-team playoff is we're gonna hopefully break away from college football's obsession with an undefeated champion. I know an undefeated champion is sexy. It's it's really nice to have a 0 in the loss column, but I think college football has for a long time here kind of weighed too much on the side of undefeated. And obviously the object of the exercise is not to lose football games, but undefeated is only something that's attainable because you play a third of your games against teams that don't deserve to be on the field with you. And that's everybody at the highest level. And that's just kind of the stratification of the sport. So I'm hoping that we get some better schedules, some more conference games, some more intense conference games in our new 12-team reality here over the next couple of years that then create an opportunity where, hey, a Florida State at 12-2 gets into the playoff as a 10 seed, and hey, they can beat somebody. They can beat 2 somebodies, and you have kind of a vibrant postseason here when we get into our 12-team format.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of those FSU LSUs. And the problem is college football schedules so far in advance. That's what makes it but I hope that the games that are scheduled, Florida State has later this decade, a home and home with Alabama and a home and home with Georgia on the schedule. I hope those stick. I worry they won't when the SEC goes to a 9-game conference schedule eventually.
Well, we'll see about that because they act like they don't know what they're doing about that. So I don't know.
The fan base may not want to keep those games. I would very much personally like to keep those games in the schedule. Those would be 2 fun trips.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to talk a little realignment before we get out here. Obviously, the August 15th deadline has passed. The talk from Florida State hasn't become action yet, where they're going to be in through at least the 2024 season. What do you make of? We've not really seen a lot of the realignment stuff has had to happen behind closed doors and just kind of it got announced or it got reported and happened. This had to happen very publicly because Florida State's in a different situation with the grant of rights. I guess, what do you make of the situation Florida State, and I know a few other schools, Clemson and the like, are in?
I think it's funny because this didn't you did not have to do that. And by that, I mean the board meeting and yada, yada, yada. Like the funniest thing about all this is how I think Florida State and Clemson are both going about their business in 2 different ways. Like Florida State, you did not have to have that public board meeting. You did not have to do all the histrionics and the saber rattling and all that kind of stuff. Clemson is just as not thrilled with their situation as Florida State is not thrilled with its situation. And State did not stand on the table with their school president talking about, we need to have a deadline in 12 months and all this sort of stuff. I think that, you understand the predicament that the 2 programs are in. You understand where they want to be. I think Florida State, Michael Alford said this a few months ago. Their biggest thing is like they look at UCF and they're like, well, UCF's probably about to make as much or a little bit more revenue than us, which, if you're mighty Florida State is something that you can't take. You're not swallowing that easy. The one thing though that I think is really overblown is the notion that like Florida State isn't a founding member of the ACC, and so they don't have like Florida State's been in the ACC for 30 years. Like, it's not like they turned up yesterday. That's one of the things that I don't truly accept. That notion is like, oh, we just got here yesterday, so we don't know a lot of loyalty. And I know loyalty is a very loose term in college sports, but like, Florida State has been in this league and led the line in this league for a long time. And I think that's something that is a little bit overblown in the discourse.
Well, and that's been a major talking point too with those Carolina media types, is definitely like, well, maybe you should be having better success over the last few years if you're going to be talking about needing to go get the money. And it's like, this isn't about wins and losses. This is about eyeballs. And when it comes to eyeballs, Florida State leads that charge, even ahead of Clemson during Clemson's best stretch in modern history. I mean,
you ask anybody in that conference office in Charlotte who they really want to be good in this league. Clemson is a lot of fun. Clemson's been a great story. Clemson is a great story, and it is a great program. It ain't Florida State when it gets cranked up. Talking to some people around the program about what the last couple months have been like, it's a little different when things get right in Tallahassee, and it adds a lot of juice to the sport. It adds a lot of juice to Florida State's, obviously, its rivalries, and it's just a different gear when Florida State is what they are supposed to be.
It feels like it's reached a point now where it's like people are saying, obviously, it's not going to reach 2036. It may not even reach 2030. There's so much unknown still because the grant of rights. I mean, it's probably, if Florida State truly wants to get out, it's probably going to come down to a legal battle. How quickly do you think things could happen on that front?
Real quick, because I don't think that the days of realignment taking like at a glacial pace are done. I think we're going to have a little bit more machinations here in the next few years. And then honestly, I think over kind of a medium to long term, we're probably going to go back the way we came as far as some more regionality, all that kind of stuff. But we've got to get through some things. We've got to go through some growing pains. And then everybody's going to turn up in like 10 years and think and realize, hey, this is kind of dumb. Let's go back to regionality. So look, Florida State's got a year, between now and next August 15th to figure out whether they're going to be in the league until the end of 2025. I think that there are a lot of people in college sports that for a long time have been waiting for somebody to test a grant of rights. I think a lot of people think that legally it can be defeated. That does not mean it actually can. I think that a lot of people discount the second portion of the grant of rights, which is copyright law. The grant of rights, and I'm sure many of your listeners know what a grant of rights is, but effectively you grant your rights to the conference office in this case. So the ACC owns everybody's rights and bundles, sells them together on the open market. Some leagues have that, some leagues don't. The SEC doesn't really need it because you're not leaving $65 million a year on the table. So obviously the ACC has this blood oath. But it's not just your television rights that are in this grant of rights. Your copyright rights are in there too. It's the second provision of the grant of rights. If you Google the contract, it's out there on the internet. You can read it. Copyright law, as I understand it from people that I speak to, is about as founded a legal precedent as we have in this country. Like, copyright law is in the Constitution. It's in the walls, baby. There aren't a lot of things, copyright law, that haven't been adjudicated, haven't been tested, haven't been poked at. So as difficult as it may be to unwind your broadcast, that portion of it, the copyright portion of the grant of rights is also difficult, is also a significant legal challenge. And I think it's also, I think that's probably the biggest, impediment to just breaking out of it tomorrow. So if Florida State wants to do it, if Clemson wants to do it, if you want to band together and do it, go ahead. Because until the moment you do it, the talk is cheap for me. Look, we know you want to leave. We know you want to leave. So you're going to have to put some money where your mouth is here pretty soon as far as actually leaving.
I hope you're right about the future of college football returning to the regionality, because I think that's what we all truthfully love about college football. be interesting to see how all that plays out. Richard, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today, giving a comprehensive look at everything. I definitely hope we're meeting up somewhere in the first few weeks of the season, either Orlando or in Clemson.
Absolutely. I hope to see you in rural South Carolina at the end of September, my friend.
Be your first time there, right? It's a fun place.
Yes, first time.
It is actually a fun stadium environment. That is true. I mean, outdoor open air press box. It's a mood, but it's it is the ultimate. The town is the college.
Absolutely.
The college is the town. All right, appreciate it, Richard.